Paratmanamekam jagadbijamadyam niriham nirakaram onkara vedyam yato jayate palyate yena vishvam tamisham bhaje liyate yatra vishvam. Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swami Tapaharine. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. My humble pranams to revered Swami Suparanandaji Maharaj, and my loving regards to all of you, dear devotees. Today I have been asked to speak on the subject of Swami Vivekananda, the great teacher of Advaita Vedanta. So before we get into the subject of Swami Vivekananda as the great teacher of Advaita Vedanta, I would like to spend some time on the very subject of what this Advaita Vedanta is. And then we shall turn back to the subject of Vivekananda as the great Advaita Acharya of our modern times. Swami Vivekananda, when he wrote the prospectus of Advaita Ashrama, you all know that Swami Vivekananda started Advaita Ashrama in 1899. In that prospectus, he makes a very beautiful observation. He says, dependence is misery and independence is happiness. And Advaita is the only system which gives unto every man complete possession of himself or herself, and takes off all dependence and makes him brave to suffer, brave to act, and in the long run to attain absolute freedom. This attainment of absolute freedom is the very song of Vedanta. Mukti, 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 Moksha. This is the only one theme of the Vedic Sanatana Dharma, as we understand. So in this beautiful statement, we find that Swamiji says, all dependence is misery. Sarvam paravasham dukkham. Sarvam atmavasham sukham. All independence is the secret of happiness. And wherever there is dependence, that becomes the cause of suffering and misery. And Advaita is the only system which makes us completely independent. So what is this Advaita Vedanta? If we just look into the whole gamut of Vedic scriptures, Sanatana Dharma, and if you just squeeze it, if you take the very essence of the Vedic scriptures and its teachings, it has got all kinds of teachings pertaining to the most grossest level to the highest flights of abstraction, spiritual abstraction, various experiences. If you take the essence of this entire range of the teachings of the Vedic Sanatana Dharma, we can tell in a nutshell, in the words of the great Acharya, who had stated, Shlokardhena pravakshyami yaduktam granta kotibhi brahma satyam jagat mithya jiva brahmaiva napara. A beautiful statement. Sri Shankaracharya says, Shlokardhena pravakshyami. I shall tell you in brief. Yaduktam granta kotibhi, which has been stated in all our scriptures. And what is that? Brahma Satyam. Brahman is Satyam. And the world, the Jagat, as we understand it, in itself, it is Mithya. And what is the actual position? This Jiva, you and I and all of us, our real status is what? We are nothing but Brahman. Jiva Brahmaiva na apara. Jagat Brahmaiva na apara. This world which we are seeing, in ignorance we call that it is world. But actually, when the knowledge dawns, it is nothing but Brahman. So what we are seeing is nothing but Brahman. Of course, this comes once the knowledge of this reality dawns. So in this beautiful statement, you have two things to understand here. What is Satyam and what is Mithya? Now, what is the definition of Satyam? In our scriptures it is said that Satyam means truth. Truth is that which does not change, which cannot be sublated, or which cannot be denied in any point of time, in all the 3 points of time, past, present, or the future, and which cannot be sublated in all the 3 states of human experience. Trikala Badhita. What is Trikala Badhita? Which cannot be, whose Badha, sublation, is impossible. No one can do it. That is the one thing which is existing always. Now, if you just ask one question, in our day-to-day experience, do we come across anything which is of this category? Has any one of us ever experienced anything which does not change, which does not get negated, which does not get denied or cancelled, which does not get sublated? We haven't experienced anything like that. What we are experiencing is pratikshanam anyatha svabhava. Every moment, everything that we are experiencing, it is subject to change and destruction. We don't experience anything unchanging. We are experiencing only change. A flow, a stream of change, a stream of flux. This is what we understand in our experience. So truth is that unchanging dimension of existence which cannot be sublated, which cannot be denied, which cannot be cancelled, which cannot be negated by anyone in any point of time and in any state of human experience. In that case, what is this world of what we are experiencing, which we term to be mithya? What do we mean by mithya? Does it mean that this is unreal? No, mithya doesn't mean this is unreal. We can't say it is unreal because we are experiencing it. How do we say that it is unreal? It is not unreal. And because if it is not unreal, does it become real? It neither is real. It is not real, and yet it is not unreal also. It is a mixture of truth and falsity. Satya and Anrita. It's a mixture of these two things, which we refer to as mithya. It is an experience of something which doesn't exist absolutely, and yet there is a relative existence to it. It cannot be denied. At the same time, it doesn't become absolutely true. This in-between existence, the play of light and darkness, it exists, and yet it doesn't absolutely exist. This is the status of all the experiences which we usually have in all the three states of waking, dream, and sleep. So this is what is referred to as mithya. Swami Vivekananda gives a beautiful example to understand this. We need to understand this. Once again, I remind all of you. Swami Vivekananda says, this is the only system which gives complete possession of one's own self, which makes every man, every woman completely independent, brave to face the ups and downs of life. When we understand this great truth, the unchanging dimension of the human personality, to understand this equation between Brahman and Jagat, to understand the relation between Satya and Mithya, from Swami Vivekananda's life, let us take one example. Once when Swamiji was walking in Rajputana, we all know after Sri Ramakrishna passed away in 1886, Swamiji went all over Bharat, and during his peregrination all over this country, he reaches the Rajputana state, the present Rajasthan. There he is walking in the desert. And you know Rajputana, Rajasthan, the desert, scorching heat, no water, and the man suffers from intense thirst. Swamiji was intensely thirsty. He was walking in midday sun, perhaps. Swamiji is giving his own experience in one of his talks in the West. In America, he refers to his own experience in one of his talks on Jnana Yoga. So when he was walking in the desert, and he was intensely thirsty, he suddenly noticed that there was a lake far away from the place where he was walking. And naturally in this situation, what will be the response of a person who is thirsty? The natural response will be, let me go and quench my thirst. So Swamiji began to walk towards that lake, which he was seeing, which he was experiencing, which in his mind there was not the slightest doubt about its existence. Swamiji says, and as he begins to walk towards this lake, interestingly, he finds the more he walks towards this lake, the more the lake begins to recede behind and behind. More he is walking towards it, the more the lake is receding behind, backward and backward. Then suddenly it struck Swami Vivekananda, and the knowledge dawned in his mind. He understood, this is not a lake. This is what is called as mirage, which is an experience in the desert. In Sanskrit, it is called mrigatrishnika. This is what happens. So the moment the knowledge came, Swamiji stopped walking. He understood, there is no lake there. The lake was appearing there. And even when the lake was appearing, what was truly existing there? There was nothing but desert. Desert alone existed there, not the lake. The lake appeared. This experience of something which does not absolutely exist and yet which appears. Again, I repeat. The experience of something which doesn't absolutely exist and yet which appears is what is referred to as the mithya dimension of existence. What actually exists is desert and desert alone. Even when Swamiji was seeing the water, what was existing, it was nothing but desert. Now Swamiji comes to our own experience. In that lecture, he says, similarly, what we are referring to as world, Jagat, Jiva and Jagat. Even when we are experiencing it, Swamiji says, it is nothing but Brahman. We are not understanding it. There is only Brahman, there is nothing apart from Brahman. Brahma Jiva Brahmaiva Napara. Jagata Brahmaiva Napara. The Jagat is nothing but Brahman alone, nothing else. There is only one non-dual reality. There are no two. That is the point. The entire crux of the Vedic Sanatana Dharma is there is no two. There is only one reality which is appearing in the form of this extremely complex and diversified existence which we are experiencing. So this is the conclusion and in Sri Shankaracharya's, all his great teachings and commentaries, we find another beautiful example he would give. Many of you who are the students of Vedanta, you might have come across that. A very similar example, illustration which he gives. The illustration of a rope and snake. Many people, they make joke of it, rope and snake illustration, but actually speaking, it is the situation we all are experiencing every day. There is a rope there somewhere. In the darkness, it appears to be like a snake. We take it to be a snake. The moment we think that it is snake, we are gripped with fear, and all kinds of negative reactions come. But when you shed the light on that, you see that it is not snake, it is rope. So even when we were experiencing snake there, actually it was nothing but rope. We were experiencing only one rope alone, but in our misunderstanding, we were thinking that it is snake. Similarly here in this, our own life, in all these three states of human experience, whether it is waking, dream, or sleep, every human being, whatever we are experiencing, it is that mithya dimension. But actually what is the truth? The truth is that there is Brahman and Brahman alone, nothing else. Everything is Brahman. Brahmaivedam sarvam. Atmaivedam sarvam. This Purnatvam, this is what Vedanta actually takes us to. Every soul is Purna, complete. When Advaitic Drishti comes to us, the first blessing which it bestows on us is a sense of Purnatvam. Our Apurnatvam comes to an end, and heart becomes fulfilled. All our restlessness, all our fear, the first thing outcome is the removal of the sense of fear. Somebody says the first thing which comes out of this kind of an Advaitic Drishti is it makes us free from sense of fear, a sense of insecurity. This is what Swamiji says. Advaita is the only system which gives unto man complete possession of himself or herself and takes him or her towards the attainment of absolute freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from bondage, freedom from slavery. Now, here itself, not in some future point of time. This is the greatest attainment that human beings can have, and it is the main purpose of human life. Sri Ramakrishna also beautifully says this very thing. Brahman is true, world is mithya. In every other page of Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you will find Bhagavan hi ek matra vastu, rest. Everything is avastu, Sri Ramakrishna says. Bhagavan is the only vastu. Bhagavan alone is existing. Everything else is avastu. Even when we are experiencing avastu, it is all nothing but Bhagavan. We are misunderstanding it. This is the point. So what is existing is only one non-dual reality. We call it Brahman. We may call it by any name, it doesn't matter. Now let us come to Swami Vivekananda. Now interestingly, Swami Vivekananda, who is the greatest Advaita Acharya of our modern times, very interestingly, there was a time in his life when he was outrightly against the Advaitic thought. It's the most fascinating kind of a development that we see in Narendranath's life before he became Swami Vivekananda. Before he became the great Advaita Acharya whom we know today, there was a period of very intense training through which he had to go under the tutorship of his great Paramahansa Guru, Sri Ramakrishna. One incident. Whenever Naren used to come to Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna would tell about these Advaitic things to Naren. And Naren would not want to listen to these things. He was dead against this idea of that everything is Brahman. He would not accept this. Yet, Sri Ramakrishna would try to put these things into his ears in some way or the other. The best thing Sri Ramakrishna found was to make him read some Advaitic text. So, Sri Ramakrishna asked him to read Ashtavakra Gita, one of the very absolutely uncompromising, a book which keeps an uncompromising picture of the reality, which is purely non-dualistic. So when Sri Ramakrishna asked Naren to read the Ashtavakra Gita, Naren would refuse to read. He would say, no, I don't want to read. I don't believe in all these things. Sri Ramakrishna then said, you may not believe it, you may not accept it, doesn't matter. You read it for my sake. Somehow or the other, Sri Ramakrishna would make him read it, though he didn't want to accept it. In this way, we see a lot of persuasion from the side of Sri Ramakrishna and a reluctance from the side of Naren to accept this great Advaitic teaching. At another point of time, once it so happened that Naren and Hazara, you know Hazara Maharshai, who was Naren's friend, they were standing together and they were talking and chatting at Dakshineshwar. And Sri Ramakrishna was listening everything from behind. And Naren, in a very sarcastic manner, he was making fun of this Advaitic proclamation that everything is Brahman. And he was telling this to his friend Hazara. You see, these writers of such books, they must be lunatics. They must have been mentally deranged to say that everything is Brahman, everything is God. This table is God, this chair is God, this plate is God, this glass is God. What nonsense. How can it be? Advaita teaches that everything is Brahman. And Naren was making fun of it. And Sri Ramakrishna was listening all this from behind. And in an ecstatic state, Sri Ramakrishna already had gone into a state of bhava, and in that state, Sri Ramakrishna very slowly and silently comes from behind and he touches Naren. And the moment Sri Ramakrishna touches Naren, Naren begins to lose all the consciousness or awareness of the external world, and his mind begins to go into the realm of non-duality. Everything is changed just by the touch of Sri Ramakrishna. Naren said that that experience lasted for several days. And what was his experience? Everything that the Upanishads talk about. Everything that all the great teachers of Advaita Vedanta have talked about. He was literally experiencing that. He was seeing only one existence everywhere. And he says that this experience lasted for several days with him. When he was, after this incident, he says that when I used to cross the road, I would not be in a position to give way to the vehicles, because that sense of differentiation between myself and the vehicle had disappeared. He would go and he would knock his head on the roadside railings just to see whether this is real. Just look at the statement. Is it absolutely real? As I said, what is the definition of mithya? Mithya is that experience of something which doesn't absolutely exist and yet which is experienced. Naren goes and knocks his head to the railings to just confirm whether this absolutely exists or not. When his mother would be serving him food on the table, he would not be in a position to eat food because that sense of differentiation between the eater of the food and the person who is serving the food is gone. One of the greatest way to understand Advaita Vedanta is nothing but the absence of bhed. All abheda drishti comes to an end. There is only one abheda tattva, where there is no bheda at all. This is what exactly Naren was experiencing for several days together. This was the first time when this Vivekananda, Narendranath at that time, experienced this great reality through the grace of his great Advaitic teacher, Sri Ramakrishna. At Kashipur, we all know that famous incident. We all know towards the end of 1885, Sri Ramakrishna's, in the middle of 1885, Sri Ramakrishna's throat pain was diagnosed to be the cancer, and he was first taken to Shampukur, and from Shampukur he was brought to Kashipur. And at Kashipur, Narendranath was pestering Sri Ramakrishna to have the experience of this Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Again and again he was pestering, I want to experience Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And Sri Ramakrishna used to say, wait, it will come in due course of time. Have patience, it will come. And one day it so happened, when Naren was meditating, suddenly his mind began to soar into the realm beyond the realm of the names and forms, and it finally got settled in that Nirvikalpa state, a first-hand experience of this very Brahman which we are talking about. And Naren was in that state for a long time. And usually what happens in this state is that that body almost appears to be like dead. So all of the disciples and those who were close by, they became worried to see Naren in this state, absolutely no sign of life. And they ran to Sri Ramakrishna to inform him that, see Thakur, what has happened? Something has happened to Naren, please see. So Naren understood what's the matter. Sri Ramakrishna understood what the matter was. So he told, let him be in that state. This Naren has been pestering for this for a long time. He has been troubling me. Now he has got that. Let him remain in that state for some time. After Naren came down from that state of experience, what was Naren's request to Sri Ramakrishna? That's very interesting, and a great lesson to learn from that. Naren tells Sri Ramakrishna that, Thakur, I want to remain in that state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where this differentiation is not at all experienced, and I shall come down from that state once in a while just to have some refreshment, a little bit of water, a little bit of food, and again I want to go back into that state. Now, any other guru who would have heard such a statement coming from the mouth of a disciple would have felt extremely elated. But here was a unique teacher in Sri Ramakrishna who said, who reprimanded, who scolded Naren, saying that, Naren, what is this? I expected that you will be like a huge banyan tree under whose shade millions of people will come and get succor and peace of mind, and you are asking for this petty thing to remain immersed in nirvikalpa samadhi with the closed eyes. What is that you are experiencing with your open eyes? Do you think is this anything different? You close your eyes, it is Brahman. You open your eyes, it is nothing but Brahman. Is there any differentiation? This is the Advaita, where Advaita means non-differentiation. There is nothing but Brahman. This was a great lesson taught to Narendranath, who in the future was to become one of the great spokesperson of this philosophy of Abheda Drishti, where the Bheda Drishti completely vanishes, whether it is with eyes closed or with the eyes opened, it is all just one Brahman. So that was the great lesson which Sri Ramakrishna taught Naren on that day, and which Swami Vivekananda would preach all over the world in the years to come. Then we have that another famous incident in Sri Ramakrishna's life. One day in Dakshineshwar, Sri Ramakrishna is talking to a group of devotees, and he's talking about God and all spiritual matters, his experiences, and he's lost in that kind of a power. And when the subject came to the basic tenets of Vaishnavism, he was enumerating the basic tenets of Vaishnavism, which is, in Bengali, he says there are three things: Name Ruchi, Jive Daya, and Vaishnava Seva. So Name Ruchi means the love to repeat the name of God, the great joy which one derives in repeating God's name, Ruchi, the great joy, the great love to repeat God's name. Second point was Jive Daya, to show compassion to everybody. And the third point was Vaishnava Seva, to serve all the bhaktas. So when Sri Ramakrishna was uttering this, all of a sudden Sri Ramakrishna went into a state of ecstasy and bhava. And from there he comes down and he says, Jive Daya, to show compassion to others. Who are we to show compassion to others? We who are like worms and petty insects, we to show compassion to others? How dare we say that we are to show compassion to others? No, it is not Jive Daya. It should be Shiva Jnane Jiva Seva. It is Shiva everywhere. It is Brahman everywhere, and we are to show compassion to others, take pity on others. How arrogant to speak like this. All that we can do is worship that Brahman in so many forms. This was a great utterance which came out from the mouth of Sri Ramakrishna. And Naren was listening to it. And Naren, on that day, later on he says, today I have heard the greatest teaching. And when the right time comes, when the time is propitious, I will declare this great teaching to the entire world. This is the greatest mantra that Sri Ramakrishna has given to us. And the basis of this great teaching is Advaita Vedanta. There is only one. There is only divinity. Where are we going to worship this divinity? In the temples? This is the greatest temple that is there in this existence. It is Brahman and Brahman alone. See it with open eyes. Do not seek it. See it. Change your drishti. Bring that Brahma drishti, Shastra drishti, Advaita drishti, and worship this Bhagavan with the open eyes. God the wicked, God the good, God the rich, God the poor, God in so many forms, Brahman in so many forms. This is the acme of spiritual experience, or what every human being can aspire for. This is the line of spiritual evolution and spiritual growth. So this was a great teaching on that day which Narendranath received. And in future, Narendranath frames the basic ideology of the twin institutions which he formed by the grace of Sri Ramakrishna. We don't believe Swami Vivekananda started Ramakrishna Math and Mission. It is Sri Ramakrishna, we don't believe that Swami Vivekananda started Ramakrishna Math and Mission. It is Sri Ramakrishna who started it. Swami Vivekananda was only an instrument to do that. And this great ideology which Swami Vivekananda gives to this twin institution is Atmano Mokshartham, Jagat Hitaya Cha. For the sake of one's own liberation, as I said in the beginning, it is Advaita and Advaita alone which gives complete possession of every man and woman and makes him brave to suffer, brave to act, brave to face the ups and downs of life, and ultimately attain absolute freedom, moksha. So Swami Vivekananda's ideology which he had given to this twin institution is Atmano Mokshartham, for the sake of one's own spiritual liberation, moksha, combined with Jagat Hitaya Cha. Why? It is the same reality. It is the same reality. It is the only one reality. You see it with the open eyes, it is Brahman. You close your eyes, it is Brahman. It's all based upon this great principle of Advaita. In the West, from this standpoint, if you read Swami Vivekananda's complete works, all the great teachings which he had given to the West, the best talks which he had delivered, including the great epoch-making 11 September 1893 speech at Chicago, it's all based on this Advaita ideology. He was the greatest Advaita teacher of the modern times. And today, if the world can be saved, today, if the humanity can be saved, today, if the human race can be saved from moving towards destruction, it is this ideology of Advaita and Advaita alone, and nothing else. In England, in 1896 or 1895 maybe, when Swami Vivekananda went to England, there he makes a great proclamation. Very interesting. Swamiji says, in America, I have just started my work. I have just raised one or two waves. We have to raise a tidal wave. The society has to be turned upside down, and the world has to be given a new civilization. Swami Vivekananda in 1895 was talking about giving this human race a new civilization. Only he can speak like that. A penniless sannyasi talks about giving a new civilization to the entire human race. Yes, his advent was meant for that. Sri Ramakrishna's advent was meant for that, to give a new civilization to this human race. And this new civilization which we are talking about, which Swami Vivekananda envisioned, it is the civilization which will be based on Advaita Vedanta. The philosophy of absolute independence and spiritual freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from narrowness, freedom from all kinds of slavery and bondage, slavery to the body, slavery to the mind, slavery to all these things of this world. Every man, every woman standing on one's own self, knowing that this self is the basis of everything that we are experiencing, and everything that is being experienced is nothing but that one self, Brahman. This is the ultimate direction in which Swamiji expected every man and woman to move. Become free, become free, become free. This is the song of Vedanta. This is the central rhythm of the Vedic scriptures. Before coming back to India from the West, Swami Vivekananda, he had come to Europe. And in Europe, when he visited the Swiss Alps in Switzerland, along with his English disciples, there, seeing the beautiful Alps, the snow-covered mountains there, Swamiji envisioned, or he expressed his wish. This great rishi is expressing his wish, and that wish has to come true. And what was his wish? He expressed that I wish that we have one ashrama in the Himalayas. He was having this vision in the Swiss Alps, and he was wanting that there should be one ashrama in the Himalayas. And that ashrama should be dedicated to Advaita and Advaita alone. There should not be the slightest trace of any dualistic practice there. That was Swami Vivekananda's vision. And very soon, his English disciples who came along with Swamiji, they went ahead and they successfully started this great Advaita Ashrama in the year 1899. It was March 1899. And later on in 1901, Swamiji comes there, this Mayavati, and stays there for 15 days. Today it is a place of pilgrimage. I should not say it is a place of pilgrimage. It is much more than that, because this great Advaita Acharya of the modern times had stayed there for 15 days. And during that time, a very interesting incident happened. All of you know that, but it is very interesting. We can visit this incident again and again. And every time we think about it, we also understand what Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda came for. What is the real ideology of Ramakrishna and Vivekananda? We may be seeing these temples, aratis and pujas and everything is going on. It's all fine. It's all true. Everything is true in its own standpoint. But the crux, the core of all these things which we see in Ramakrishna Mission and Mutt, all that we see in the Hindu Sanatana Dharma, that's all the temples and rituals and pujas, prarthanas, pilgrimages. What is the core of all that? It is Advaita Vedanta. It's all the stepping stone towards that great understanding. So Swamiji wanted one center where Advaita and Advaita alone would be practiced. And at that time, when he was staying there for 15 days, it so happened that one day, Swamiji came across one sadhu who had made a small shrine there in Mayavati. He had placed a picture of Sri Ramakrishna there, and he was offering flowers and incense sticks and all those things which we usually do. Seeing this, Vivekananda became extremely displeased. He expressed his displeasure openly, saying that this is not the place to do this. Swami Vivekananda had mentioned his whole idea about Advaita Ashrama in the prospectus, that this ashram is dedicated to Advaita and Advaita alone and nothing else. And it so happened that that shrine was not withdrawn. That sadhu, just see, sadhu thought, okay, let me ask Shri Shri Ma, Sharda Devi. He thought that Sharda Devi would support him. Why, how can Sharda Devi say anything against the worship of Sri Ramakrishna? So with that kind of an expectation, the sannyasi wrote to Sharda Devi, saying that such a thing has happened and Naren is wanting that this shrine should be removed. And what was the reply that came from Sri Sharda Devi? About whom no words can speak enough. It's very difficult to put Sri Sharda Devi in the ambit of few words. Sharda Devi wrote beautifully, what Naren is doing is the right thing. Secondly, Sri Ramakrishna is Advaita, and we are all Sri Ramakrishna's disciples, and you are all Advaitins. Once and for all time, this debate about what Sri Ramakrishna's core ideology is was put to rest. The basic ideology of Ramakrishna Mutt and Ramakrishna Mission is Advaita. And in that, Swami Vivekananda was the unique teacher of the modern times who started an ashrama exclusively dedicated to the practice of Advaita Vedanta. Interestingly, even the great Sri Shankaracharya, whenever the topic of Advaita Vedanta comes, there stands Sri Shankaracharya like a Himalaya. Even this great Sri Shankaracharya didn't establish a monastery which was exclusively dedicated to Advaita Vedanta. All the monasteries and mathas which Sri Shankaracharya had established, in all those mathas we find the worship of Ma Sharada, Sharadamba, Divine Mother, worship goes on. Anyhow, so in this way we can see that Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, they belong to that league of great Advaitins which we have in our great tradition, going back to the source of the Upanishads, coming down to Bhagavad Gita, coming down to, you may say, the Shukadeva, the great Gaudapadacharya, the great Govindapadacharya, Sri Shankaracharya, and in our modern times we have Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. That is the great parampara, the Advaita parampara, which continues. And it is this Advaita and Advaita alone which, actually speaking, as I said before, it can help the human race become free from all the ailments which it suffers from. The ailments of fanaticism, dogmatism, the chronic disease of hatred and violence, which the entire human race is suffering from. Why? Because of the absence of the knowledge of the one reality, in which there is no bheda, which is the very one thing which makes this entire human family a one family, this human race into one family. So that is why, once again, I go back to that point from where I had started. Swami Vivekananda writes in his prospectus, all dependence is misery, independence is happiness. Sarvam paravasham dukkham. Paravasham is dukkham and sarvam atmavasham is sukham. When we are atmavash, when we are independent, then only we will understand what happiness is. And it is this Advaita and Advaita alone is one system which gives unto man complete possession of himself or herself and makes him or her brave to suffer, brave to act, brave to face the ups and downs of life, and ultimately walk towards the great experience of absolute freedom. This Advaita and Advaita alone can do this. And Vivekananda was the greatest, is the greatest Advaita Acharya of the modern times, and he was trained to become like this by the great Guru, Paramahamsa, Sri Ramakrishna. Thank you so much. devotees, we are glad to inform you all that Prabuddha Bharat has entered the 125th year of its existence. You all know that Prabuddha Bharat is the English monthly journal of the Ramakrishna order. It is the journal which was started by Swami Vivekananda himself in 1896. Why did Swami Vivekananda start this journal? Swamiji started this journal in order to bring out the universal scientific spiritual wisdom hidden in the Vedas, and in order to make this spiritual wisdom popular, not only in India, but all over the world. And Swami Vivekananda very strongly believed that it is in and through this spreading of the spiritual wisdom that India can be awakened and the entire world can be awakened. And Prabuddha Bharat, in the last 125 years, has been silently doing this work in a commendable fashion. The spiritual articles published in Prabuddha Bharata has impacted the thinking class of people all over the world, and it has resulted in a silent awakening. But we have yet a very long way to go. We need to promote this journal. We need to get more subscribers. And in order to promote this journal, Advaita Ashrama has initiated this Prabuddha Bharat Campaign, a program which is essentially meant for promoting this journal. Now, what is this Prabuddha Bharat Campaign? In and through this Prabuddha Bharat Campaign, all that you need to do is bring 5 new subscribers for Prabuddha Bharat. That will be an act of great contribution from your side, an act of great punya, a very meritorious act, in and through which you will be helping Prabuddha Bharat grow and also helping fulfilling Swami Vivekananda's vision of spreading the spiritual message all over the world and also in India. So we honestly appeal every follower, every devotee, every admirer of Swami Vivekananda to come forward and participate in this Prabuddha Bharat campaign and bring 5 new subscribers for the Prabuddha Bharata and help Prabuddha Bharat grow. Thank you.